You are listening to the Love and Money podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Michael Taylor. Thank you for being on the show, Michael.
Has committed his life to empowering people to transform their lives from the inside out. And what I mean by that is through my writing and through my speaking, I coach people on how to become the best version of themselves.
Okay. That sounds good. And what is your background, Michael?
Well, I'm self-educated, never went to school to learn how to write. It's just something that I've always been passionate about. I don't have any formal education, but again, I've written 9 books. I've been on international television. It's just something that I'm just really passionate about, and I just taught myself how to do.
Okay. That's interesting that you wrote 9 books. So I saw one of your books about breaking stereotypes on Black men. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes is the title, and the subtitle is Eradicating the 10 Most Destructive Media-Generated Illusions About Black Men. And the intention of the book is to empower Black men to recognize that there's a media narrative that says that, we have all these different stereotypes about Black men, which are usually pretty negative. And so what I want to do is I identify what I call the 10 most destructive ones. And so I challenge Black men to ask themselves honestly if they've actually bought into any of the stereotypes. Because if you believe in these stereotypes and you act consistent with those stereotypes, there's no way that you can live an extraordinary life. And so to support and empower Black men, I wrote the book, and I also host every year a Shattering Stereotype Summit. And I also host on a monthly basis, or actually bi-monthly basis, a podcast called Shattering Stereotypes. And on the podcast, I bring in men from all different walks of life. I've had spine surgeons, athletes, actors, chefs, photographers, just brothers from different environments to share wisdom and insights to support and empower Black men. Because as mentioned, the media says that there's a lack of Black male role models, but there's never been a lack of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of Black men in the media in a positive light. And that's why I launched the Shattering Stereotypes platform.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting because we do see negative images in the media about Black men every day on a consistent basis.
Yes.
And so I'm interested. Can you just name one stereotype that comes to mind?
Yeah, the very first stereotype, which is one of the most destructive, is the fact that the stereotype is, or what I like to call them, the illusion. The illusion is Black men are an endangered species. And the reason that I started off with that particular illusion is because we are so inundated with so many negative stories and images in the media. A lot of times some Black men believe this idea that we're an endangered species. And I began writing back in 1995 because I was in a restaurant one day and I overheard a conversation between these two apparently well-educated, well-spoken professional Black men. And they were having a conversation about the eradication of Black men from society. And it was really a depressing conversation. And so I walked over to their table. I apologized for eavesdropping, and I said, man, please tell me you don't believe what you just said. And one of the men looked at me and he says, absolutely. And he said this, don't you watch the news? He said, I believe in 20 years, all Black men will either be dead or in jail. And it wasn't what he said so much that really broke my heart, but it was how he said it. I could feel the powerlessness he felt in his voice. I could feel that this brother had just basically given up on life because he felt that society was so stacked against him. And he had bought into that first stereotype. He had bought into the illusion that Black men were an endangered species. And so after I looked at the guy and I knew there was nothing I could have said that would have changed his mind. So I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, don't believe the hype, my brother, don't believe the hype. And I walked away. But as I walked away, there was a part of me that said, you have to do something. You have to do something to change the mindset of Black men. Now, at the time, my life was in total chaos. I'd gone through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a depression. And who was I to say that I could do something? But there was that still small voice in me that said, yes, you have to do something. And so I was able to rebuild my life after all of those adversities. And I remember that conversation with the brothers in the restaurant. And then I figured out what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to write a book. And back in 1995, I wrote a book called Brothers Are You Listening? A Success Guide for the 90s. And in the book, I shared the journey that I had been on, overcoming all those adversities that I just mentioned. And my intention, again, was to empower Black men to change their mindsets. And that's when and how I became a writer, based on that conversation with those brothers in the restaurant.
Okay, so this is pretty deep. So you believe that Black men are not an endangered species?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, Black men are doing better today than we have ever been. Now, a lot of Black people will argue that point because we see stories of police brutality and all the negative stories in the media, which I don't want to discount or minimize the challenges that are there. But if you look at it in its totality, Black men are in every segment of society. There's no segment of society that doesn't have Black male present. As mentioned, through my podcast, I have done interviews with Black men across the country that are doctors, lawyers, physicists, astrophysicists, spine surgeons, attorneys, actors, football players. I mean, you name it, we as Black men, we are doing it. And so the problem is we get so attached to the media and we believe what we see in the media, even though we recognize the media's bias. Too many times we still buy into those illusions. So it's important for us to recognize that we're not denying I'm not denying that there are challenges for Black men. What I'm saying is that I personally believe there's never been a better time to be alive on this planet than right now, especially for Black men, despite what we see in the media.
Okay, I like that. And I like that you are exposing positive images.
Mm-hmm. That's the whole point.
Okay. And so I reached out to you because I'm looking for positive images as it pertains to Black marriage.
Okay.
And so I'd like to ask you a little bit about marriage, especially for the single women who are listening. I'd like to know if you like being married and why did you marry your wife?
A couple of things. First of all, in the book Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, one of the illusions is that Black men can't be monogamous. So we hear all the time that Black men just want to be players and Black men don't know how to commit to one woman. And that's an illusion. Black men are just as capable as any other group of men to create loving, caring, passionate, fulfilling relationships. Unfortunately, again, we don't see much of that in the media. So it is our responsibility as Black men to, number one, wake up from that illusion and also begin having a conversation amongst ourselves about the importance of having loving, intimate, monogamous relationships. So that is actually in the book, one of the stereotypes. So in regards to marriage, as mentioned, I'd gone through a divorce, and I got married for all the wrong reasons the first time. Okay. I was young. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was doing everything society said I was supposed to do. But I didn't really know how to trust my own heart. I really didn't know how to trust how I felt about the person I was with. I was just doing it because society said I was supposed to do it. Well, as mentioned, I went through a divorce. And as a result of that divorce, I started asking myself some deeper questions. And the deeper question was, what does it take to make marriage work? And interesting story. After my divorce, I was really struggling with creating great relationships. And I noticed this amazing pattern. I would date a woman for about 3 to 4 weeks max. And then the women were all saying the same thing. I care too much about you to stay in this relationship, which made absolutely no sense to me at the time. But then they would say this: the reason that I'm leaving is because you're emotionally unavailable. Okay. And when they said that, I had no idea what that meant. But I became committed because I wanted to figure out how to create a great relationship. So I started doing some research. I started understanding that emotional unavailability was the result of some emotional baggage that I've been carrying around since I was a kid. So I had to go through this healing process. And through that healing process, I learned how to, first of all, love myself and be comfortable with who I am. But then I also learned how to just open my heart to a person and not be emotionally disconnected. And as a result, I've been blissfully married for the past 19 years. My wife and I have been together 21 years. I absolutely love being married. And it was a challenge at the beginning, not the marriage, but just my willingness to figure out why my first marriage didn't work out. And I think that's the problem that most people have. We go through a divorce or we go through a bad relationship and we point fingers at the other person.
Yes.
But we have to be willing to look at ourselves and say, so what is it about me that I need to change in order to create great relationships? And that's a really challenging and difficult thing to do. So from a female perspective, it's important that women understand that, women have always been taught and conditioned to be the nurturers, to be the emotional support for men. But unfortunately, a lot of women don't know how to set boundaries for themselves because they're so focused on taking care of their man. Nothing wrong with taking care of your man. But if you don't love yourself first, you can't love your man. So it's important for women to recognize that one of the most important things women need to learn is how to set healthy boundaries for themselves. Because a lot of us don't know how to trust our intuition, trust our feeling. Because I can assure you, every person, male or female, that's been in a relationship that's not working, we've had a feeling that something is just not right. But we may not acknowledge it. We may not say anything about it. But if we'll learn to listen to that intuition will teach us how to set boundaries. Because when it doesn't feel right, then we have to speak up. We have to talk about why we feel that way and communicate with that other person. And if that person can't communicate back with us, then that may be a red flag of why we may not need to be in that relationship.
Okay. So you love being married. I like to hear that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because men generally, and I wrote a book called A New Conversation with Men. And in that book, I identify what I call the 5 illusions of manhood. And the very first illusion is, to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. Now, that is the foundation of most of the challenges we as men have, because we have been conditioned to believe that feelings are for women. And men don't know how to get in touch with their feelings because they're afraid of being called feminine. Well, you can't be relational if you're unwilling to be emotional. And so as men, we have to learn how to be in touch with our emotions in order to create intimacy and connection in relationships. And so men, we put on these masks and we pretend, that we're tough and, society says our job is to provide and protect. But society didn't teach us how to connect. And what men really long for is connection. But because of that first illusion, we don't know how to connect. A lot of us don't have the emotional maturity, the emotional vocabulary to really communicate in a way that we can create intimacy and connection in relationships. So that's one of the things that I do when I'm coaching men. I get them to recognize that it's okay to be in touch with how you feel. As a matter of fact, being in touch with how you feel is the only way that you'll ever create relationships that will really last.
Okay, Michael. So do men really want connection? Because I know women do. Do men really want connection?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, most of us don't know how to get connection. Okay. Because, again, our culture has conditioned us as men to think that our 3 responsibilities are what I call the 3 Ps: procreate, provide, and protect. Now, this has been going on since the beginning of time. Men have been conditioned to believe those are our responsibilities. But see, what's happening is all of the roles for men are changing. Why are they changing? Because the roles for women have changed.
Yeah. So
there was a time when, the women's job was to stay home, raise the kids, clean up the house and all that. Women don't do that.
Everything
is, to say they don't do that anymore, but it's not the priority anymore.
Everything is mixed up now. Everything is mixed up.
Well, but it's mixed up in a good way. And here's here's what I mean. A lot of people don't recognize that in the USA right now, for the first time in this country's history, there are more women in the workforce than men. Not only that, there are more women graduating from college than men. So with that being said, women no longer have to be dependent on men the way they used to be in the past. So unfortunately, there are some women that are saying, I don't need a man, which I think we all want to be connected to someone. But what's happening is as the roles change, we, especially as men, have to change. Because again, the women are changing. The women are moving forward. They're saying, look, we can do it without you. So as men, we have to start asking ourselves some really uncomfortable questions. Like, what does it really mean to be a man? If I become a stay-at-home dad, does that make me less of a man? I say no. But there are a lot of men who really struggle with that idea because we feel emasculated by not providing.
Right.
Because we think that's our job. And so for a lot of men, it's a struggle because they don't know how to change with these changing roles. But guess what? You don't have a choice. You do not have a choice because that's just human evolution. Human evolution says that people grow and change, and the only thing that's constant is change. So for men, we must be willing to change. And it's really, really difficult to get men to change because of cultural conditioning. But that's why my program is so important, because I give men an opportunity to say a lot of things that they probably were thinking and feeling, but they didn't have the courage to do it. And so I create what I call a safe space where men can get real, get honest, and be transformed.
Okay. I like that you have a path for exposing positive images of Black men. And so as it pertains to positive images for Black marriage, what is one piece of advice that you can give for single women that would get them a step closer to being married to the right person?
Well, first and foremost, it begins with self-love, period. Because if you are carrying around a lot of emotional baggage and you're trying to find that person to fill those voids that you feel inside of yourself, you'll never create a great relationship. Your relationship will be built on a sense of I'm not enough, so I'm trying to bring something into my life to make me feel good about myself. So a woman needs to take the time to really get to know who she is. To not be so attached to rigid traditions that says, a woman is supposed to do this, that, and the other. Clean house, take care of the kids and all that. Women need to be empowered for themselves to understand that, again, they have now access to have anything they want in their lives. So I believe every human being, we have a very basic need. And that need is connection. We all want to feel connected. We all want to feel loved. But we can't feel loved if we don't love ourselves. And so it begins with a woman being honest with herself and asking herself, what is it about me that I need to look at in order to attract the man of my dreams? Because have you ever heard of the term the law of attraction?
I have, yes.
Okay, so very basic, scientifically based principle. And this principle is called the law of attraction. Now, the law of attraction simply states, as human beings, we are energetic beings, okay? So our feelings, our emotions, they emit an energy. So if I'm a positive, optimistic person, that's the energy that I give off, okay? If I'm a loving, caring person, that's the energy that I give off. But if I'm insecure and fearful and angry and judgmental, that's an energy that I'm going to give off. So guess what I'm going to attract in a relationship? Because we attract not what we want, we attract who we are. So we have to be willing to be in touch with the energy that we're emitting so that we can attract to us that which we really desire. And so that's a process that we have to go through to get in touch with who we are, how we feel, what's going on inside of us, and what we're attracting to into our lives. Because the universe, in my judgment, is absolutely perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So we just have to understand the laws and the principles that govern the universe. And when it comes to relationships, it's really simple. You're going to attract at the same level of energy that you are. So if you are vibrating, let's look at it from this point. So there's a guy named David Hawkins. He created this scale, and it's called the consciousness scale. And so just imagine a scale from 1 to 1,000. Okay, that's the scale. Now he says the average human being vibrates at around 200. Okay, so it's an energy, 200. Now, if you have a lot of unresolved emotional conflict, maybe some trauma from your childhood or whatever, then you're probably going to be vibrating at maybe a 50 or a 75 or somewhere on the lower end of the scale. Okay, are you with me? You with me?
I hear you.
Okay, so imagine that I'm vibrating at a 75 because of some bags that I'm carrying around I haven't dealt with. Well, when I go to find a relationship, if I'm vibrating at a 75, I am only going to attract a 75 or less. You will not attract to you higher than what you are emanating. So the key to creating great relationships is to climb up that scale. How do you climb up that scale? You heal your emotional baggage. When you heal your emotional baggage, you climb up the scale. As you climb up the scale, you're going to attract a different level of vibration. So if you get to 200, which is a normal human being, if you will, you get to 200, if you've done your work, you're going to attract a 200. You're no longer going to attract a 75 or a 50. But you got to be willing to do the work to get in touch with your emotional self and heal any past traumas that may keep you below that 200 number. Does that make sense?
Well, Michael, I'm not. Okay, I'm not going to debate you. And,
open to debate. I love debate.
Michael.
No, if you completely disagree, I'd love to hear why.
No, I am aware of the law of attraction, and I listened to. Have you heard of Abraham Hicks?
Absolutely.
Abraham Hicks, Neville Goddard. Is there anybody like that in the love department, specifically for love?
Well, that applies to love, actually.
Okay.
So if you're thinking that it's different, it's really not.
Okay.
Vibration is vibration. And if it comes to love and attracting the perfect person, the same law applies.
Okay. Okay, Michael. I'm just going to ask you 2 more questions.
Okay.
Can you talk briefly about your book? I know you were talking about it earlier. Can you talk briefly about your book and where people can go to find your book?
Okay, again, I've written 9, so if we're talking about shattering black male stereotypes, that's one of 9. If you look over my shoulder here, you can see the covers of the other books that I've written. Specifically for men is where most of my focus is, but Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, they can go to shatteringblackmalestereotypes.com, and on that site is designed specifically for men of color, black men. Of course, I do have a lot of females that go on the site because they're wanting to learn about men, so there's some resources there available for them also. But that's for that particular book. That's the best way to find it is at shatteringblacmalestereotypes.com or any online bookstore they can find it.
Okay, and can you repeat one last time? Where can people go to find you if they'd like to know more?
Simplest place is CoachMichaelTaylor.com. And that's Michael, Michael, CoachMichaelTaylor.com, which is my primary speaker site. And most of my events and things that I do, you can locate on that particular site.
Okay, sounds good, Michael. Thank you for being on the show and sharing your story.
All righty, thank you.